All right, good evening, Protectors. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. You have Greg LaBeouf here with you, Dustin Dodere as well. And again, we've been off for a couple weeks. We're back at it here tonight. Coach Vanderlei, Coach Brad will be joining us next week, I believe. So tonight's going to be pretty awesome. Let's jump into this. I want to set it up. Tonight, I called this episode Conflict, Mitigation, Escalation, and Annihilation. And very few people, just set this up a little bit here. This really came about because I see this so often in new clients that I'm training where people don't have a great awareness of like the different phases of conflict. And so I just broke it down just for simplicity into these three kind of phases, meaning there's mitigation, there's escalation, and there's annihilation. And so tonight I really want to break this down because I want to go deeper than what you think. I don't just want to talk about, how we mitigate what happens during escalation and the annihilation phase of it. I actually want to go a little bit deeper and I want to talk about what this means for modern day warriors, because this is, I think, drastically undertrained. So when, anyone that's looking to say, listen, all I give a shit about is being able to protect my family from, violent criminal assault, this is desperately missing out of most training programs, okay? And that leaves a very, very big hole. And it's the holes and the gaps in our training that are going to get us killed. So, all right, guys, well, we're going to cut away, go to our intro, back in 30 seconds. Conflict, mitigation, escalation, and annihilation. Stick with us, guys. Hey, everybody, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg LaBeouf, and I'm sharing insights for how I went from the victim of a brutal attempted murder to weaponizing my mind and body, mastering the tool of violence so that I can protect myself and my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, okay, we're back. So let's dive into this. So conflict, mitigation, escalation, and annihilation. Before the intro, I said that most people are just very unaware of that fact that there's different phases to confrontation, okay? So I actually want to jump to my end point, my bigger point, my deeper point, and then we're going to circle back and kind of work through this. But we always tell people from the beginning that you really have two options when it comes to violence, okay? Remove yourself from the situation. It's always option number one. Remove yourself from the situation. If you cannot remove yourself from that situation, remove the situation. That's your second option. So it's either remove yourself from that situation or remove the situation, and you have to do each without prejudice. Okay, so just real quick, meaning what? It doesn't matter if you can walk away, walk away. Remove, detract, or deter. Okay, if you can de-escalate, you can deter the person, or you can remove yourself. That's option number one. And you should do that without prejudice, meaning, right, there's the next cliche saying we use, but there's the three fights. There's the fight you train for, the fight you get in, and the fight you have with yourself on the way home. Now, a lot of times, if you remove, de-escalate, or deter, you're going to have a fight with yourself on the way home. But meaning what? Meaning there's part of you that goes, fuck, man, like I should have done something. Like that guy was rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent towards my family, and I didn't do anything. I fucking removed, I de-escalated, I deterred that situation. And that gets amplified when you actually have the fucking skill sets. When you have the strategic tactical knowledge for how to actually use the tool of violence, so you can fucking protect and defend, that can amplify the fight you have with yourself on the way home when you successfully remove, de-escalate, or deter. That's okay. That's normal. But you have to learn how to remove yourself, de-escalate, or deter without prejudice. Meaning that it's like, if I can do that, I'm fucking doing that without a bias, without that guilt, without that second guessing bullshit. But the same is true for the second side of the equation. If you cannot remove yourself from the situation, then you need to fucking remove the situation. And that has to be without prejudice, meaning you got to understand how to use the tool of violence, and you use speed, surprise, and violence of action without regret and without prejudice. Now remember, all of this is predicated off the fact that when legally and morally justified. Right? Because a lot of people like that, if you talk about using violence and you do it without remorse and without regret, a lot of people are like, whoa, hang on a second. No, fuck. When you're legally and morally justified in using violence, self-defense is a right, up to and including lethal force. That's not what we want to have happen, but if it fucking happens, then that's what happens. That's why we train, because there's evil people in this fucking world. And so we're prepared to face those people. Okay, so conflict, mitigation, escalation, and annihilation are the three phases. Remove yourself And if you cannot remove yourself, remove the situation. Okay, that's a dumbed down version of it. So here's the first thing I want to talk about, and then Dustin, I want to get your thoughts right off the bat. But when I said that very few people understand this, just with what I said, I know you understand it, so I'm asking this kind of rhetorically to the audience. I want them to think about it. Do you understand the level of emotional fucking intelligence that warriors need to possess / be trained up to be able to handle these three phases? Do you get how multidimensional the demands of mitigation, escalation, and annihilation are on the individual that finds himself in conflict, up to and potentially lethal force conflict? It is, if you just sit for a second with the weight of that, it is fucking staggering. So I'm going to let you give your visceral opinion of this, but that's where I actually want to start this conversation. Because if we don't understand how fucking taxing this is, how challenging this is, what a high-level advanced skill this is, then the rest of the conversation makes no fucking sense. So I'll pass the baton over to you a little bit, and you can throw out your initial thoughts on this.
Yeah, I agree 100% with this being, such an important part of it and such a difficult part for so many people. And to me, it's like, even when you just did the very first, like the intro tonight, like the thing that just hit me, I'm like, oh yeah, mud in the water. Like that's what we're talking about. Just the water's cloudy, and anytime you reference, oh, I work with new clients, and it says like, oh yeah, I already know. I know the problems they're having. I know the questions they're asking you, because there's just all that uncertainty, and it's like, well, is it this and is it that, and what if this and what if that, and so yeah, like you said, there's so much to learn, and I think proof of that, even in guys who train a really long time, like I've been doing this for a super long time. And I've had conversations with other guys doing it a super long time, and they feel the same way as me, in that the closest thing we have to actual violence is our live force-on-force scenario training. And we've talked many times about how in those scenarios, as stuff's happening and you're having to sort of navigate and figure out, okay, where is this person in the escalation phase and all that, is like, man, this would be so much easier if this guy just tried to hit me in the face. Do you know what I mean? It's like, because that's simple. Like the strategies we teach people are dead simple. Like anybody can learn them, anybody can do them. Yes, you can get more proficient and all that stuff. You can get better at the tactics and all that. You can polish the tools off. But at the end of the day, it's like that part's simple. Once you learn it, you practice it, master it, like it's simple. That's easy. So it's like, just hit me in the face, because then I know what I'm doing. Yeah. But it's all the pre-stuff that does take way more time, effort, and understanding. And not that you can't learn it quick, but there's always going to be that awkwardness to it, or that it's going to feel difficult. And it's probably something where you know more than you think you know, and you understand it better than you think you do. But anyway, yeah.
No, okay. Excellent points. And one thing I just want to jump on while it's fresh in my mind is, you said, it's not that you can't learn it, right? Like if someone just punches you in the face, or someone pulls a knife on you, or someone's holding a gun to you and you're like, fuck, this guy's going to shoot me. Like when that shit becomes obvious, now you're like, I'm in a threat here. You go, well, that part's easy, because now you're just, what are my strategy, tactics, and tools, and you're just executing on that, right?
Yep.
But you say, like, it's not that you can't learn all the pre-stuff, but the pre-stuff is where the waters get muddy. And I'll break it out for people. The waters get muddy because people have to answer two questions. And this is what's happening in the survival reaction time model. Meaning that first is that we perceive, our emotional system picks up on a threat first. So you feel it first, then that becomes a thought, and that thought has to be translated into action, to download. But what is the perception? What is the thought? Okay, and again, this is happening viscerally, but it is, first question, is this a threat? Second question, what level of threat? That's what fucks people up. Recognizing a true threat. Not just posturing, not just, like, again, somebody can be rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent. Now, right away, when I say someone can be rude and inappropriate, most people go, yeah, okay, that's not justification to use violence, because they're just being rude and they're being inappropriate. So no matter how socially unacceptable it is, they're just being rude and inappropriate. So I get how you could get yourself into trouble if all of a sudden you unleash the tool of violence on this person. So that part, okay, great. Then I say, so rude and inappropriate, aggressive, or violent. And then people are like, well, no, if they're aggressive or they're violent, automatically I feel justified. But that's not black and white like that. There's people that can be exhibiting aggressive behavior, but they are not a threat to you. There's still no intent to harm you. But they are aggressive. They can be aggressive to the environment. They can be aggressive to you in a general sense. They can be violent, acting violent, behaving violent, but that threat is not singularly or not focused in on you. So again, the intent, the direct intent to harm you or your family or other innocent people potentially isn't there yet. Now, of course, it can be. Somebody can be rude to you, and they can have a very pointed, intent to harm towards you. But they're not at the physical level of it turning physical yet. But you can get a sense of intent to harm from somebody who's being rude and inappropriate. Right? You got to remember, there's emotional trauma, there's mental trauma, like there's emotional and mental assaults. Okay, so my point is just that this, you can see where you're like, now we're talking about layers in this stuff, but is this a threat? Well, that's not always black and white. That's why you just said, if the guy punched me in the mouth, is this a threat? Well, yeah, he just fucking punched me in the mouth. What level of threat? Well, he's punching at me. What if the guy had brass knuckles on? What if the guy picked up a fucking empty bottle and went to smash you in the face? Is this a threat? What level of threat? Well, people can start to see the differences. It becomes more black and white. Well, he grabbed a fucking bottle. He put on brass knuckles and cocked his hand back. So is this a threat? Fuck yeah, it's a threat. What level threat? Fuck. If I get hit with brass knuckles on by this guy who weighs me by 80 pounds, I'm not going to have a fucking face left. So I'd say it's pretty fucking severe. And then it goes to download. So that's where the waters get muddy. Now, sorry, a bit of an explanation on that, but when you said that you can train this stuff, you absolutely, and you can learn it very quickly. You can learn it if it's trained. And I wanted to hit on that because what you said is like, because we do train this, because this is a massive part of weaponizing people. The mind must always precede the body. So training the physical body and viscerally imparting a survival motor program, teaching them how to utilize the tool of violence, that's easy. That's what you said. That's like asking, someone's applying to be a lifeguard. You don't sit there and talk about, hey, can you swim? Like, it's like a fucking prerequisite to be able to swim. Swimming's the easiest part of the job. Can you recognize the signs that tell you to stop somebody from getting in the water before they fucking drown? How about that for a lifeguard? How about recognizing the pins and the signs that tell you somebody's about to be in trouble so that you can start taking preemptive action right away and save way more fucking lives, make it way fucking easier, and probably not even have to get in the water and get wet. Now that's a good fucking lifeguard. So we'll probably interview and talk about those skill sets more than just, hey, how good a swimmer are you? I'd rather wait till somebody's at the bottom of the pool fucking passed out. But goddamn, if you can swim fast underwater and pick them, like that's pretty fucking, like that's a horrible fucking lifeguard. Okay, so this is where it gets more, and so that's what I wanted to hit on tonight is, but again, understand the emotional intelligence, the range, because so let's tie this back in. Conflict mitigation. So from mitigation, what's conflict mitigation, right? It is the act of reducing the severity of something. So in this case, a threat. So you get it, right? We remove the severity of a threat if we remove ourselves from the situation, clearly. Now, if we can deter, or if we can de-escalate using maybe, nonviolent verbal tactics and all this type of stuff, we are reducing the severity of something. So to mitigate means to reduce the severity. Okay, now, what does your emotional intelligence have to be to execute on that? You get what I mean? Like, you're this fucking warrior. You're somebody who's been fucking training and battle hardening themselves for the ultimate righteous fight, meaning some motherfucker at 3 o'clock in the morning kicks down your front door and there's 2 or 3 of these guys, armed intruders that want to slaughter your family. You're walking down the street and all of a sudden some fucking motherfucker comes storming into you're at the Fringe Festival walking around and some guy with knives taped to his hand starts fucking, drives a vehicle through the crowd, pops out and starts stabbing people like what happened over in the UK. Like you're like, boom, oh shit. So you're training for the annihilation phase of it. And that spectrum to be like, all right, bang the fucking bullets, let's go, killer instinct, fucking boom, 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 boom. But all of a sudden, you're in mitigation. Check the fucking ego. You got all the skills, you got all the killer instinct, you've got all the strategies and tactics. You're a certified fucking badass. Now, mitigate. This person that's being rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent, maybe there's no intent to harm yet, but you have to then mitigate, meaning a lot of times you have to, you have to compartmentalize that part of you. And let's just be honest, it's not always easy because as human beings, we can move very quickly to what we call forebrain rationalization, where we in our brains go, fuck this guy, This guy deserves punishment. And as you know, there's a massive difference between defending, protecting, and punishing.
Yeah, it's called jail.
Yeah, it's called jail. It's called a criminal record in jail, 100%. 100%. Right? So just this fucking contrast between, can you keep your ego in check? Like, what is truly your goal here? Because if you look at most training, so if you did jiu-jitsu, like pure Brazilian jiu-jitsu, or you do Thai boxing, or you do boxing, or whatever, Taekwondo, whatever you do, to each art, there is a fairly, there is an overarching emotional content to that. Like jiu-jitsu, the gentle art of jiu-jitsu, understanding levers. I'm not saying that you can't, change the emotional content, but overarching, a lot of it is this ability to control somebody who has, let's say, an intent to do you harm in a fight type situation, higher levels, mid to higher level, but not non-lethal force type stuff. And or even some, but the point is they can control him. I can take this guy to the ground. I can control him. There's no need to strike him. There's no, I'm just controlling him through positioning, controlling him through alavanca, controlling him through the leverage. And that all is true, and that's great. But that is a one-dimensional predominant archetype that comes with jiu-jitsu. But at the same time, you have to recognize that you may also find yourself in a situation where you need to annihilate. Now, right away, people go, yeah, but it's there because when you spin out to that arm bar, or you grab that ankle lock or that knee bar, and you fucking bend his joint backwards, you just annihilated the fuck out of that joint. Yes, that's true. Within some of the tools, tactics, and strategies, they can do immeasurable damage. But the mindset is also slightly different in that. And when you start going mass attack and you start going, the lethal force side of it is very, very different than just, again, it's devastating to rupture a joint or something like that. And you would get a lot of people that train in jiu-jitsu that would have a very hard time actually executing on that final, destruction of the joint. And, again, now the argument going, well, then you wouldn't need to, you could just choke them up, whatever. You get the point that I'm talking about. From mitigation to annihilation, and in between that is escalation, you want options. You need versatility in your emotional intelligence, because those are two totally different start points. When you go into the mitigation aspect, and then when you go to the annihilation, and sometimes it starts right at annihilation, and escalation muddies that, and so you got to have this transition. So, just what do you think about, again, the in your experience and what you've seen and working with people, where the struggle lies in how diversified and dynamic these emotional states are?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think it's huge. And as you said, I think ego is a massive, massive part of it. In both the moment of trying to decide what response is appropriate, what response is inappropriate. And then again, I think ego plays huge, like you said, in that fight you have with yourself after.
Yeah.
If you've been doing this for a really long time, and you get into some kind of an altercation, and you're there with your kids, let's say, even young teenager kids, yeah, and they know you've been training for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, yeah, and you manage to kind of talk your way out of it, but maybe it's not easy. Maybe it's not just, oh yeah, hey, I don't want any trouble, and we walk away this way and it's over. Yeah. Maybe it's not that simple. Do you know what I mean? And so as you're going through that, you get through it fine. But then after, it's I think it'd be hard for a lot of people, if they haven't been forewarned about this and prepared for it, to not question themselves and be like, well, what does my kid think? Yeah. Did my kid probably expects that I should have dealt with that differently. I should have went physical because, well, you spend all this time training. Well, how many hours have you been doing this? How many years? And you just talk to the guy and you walk away. You know what I mean? And your kid may not even say it. But it would be very easy for someone to project that onto their kid and be like, well, they're probably thinking it. Yep. Do you know what I mean? So the ego can be super dangerous. Like I said, equally during and then equally after. So I think learning to manage that part of it is a massive, massive thing for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that one of the things that we do that maybe will help people, have a really good visual picture of this is I talk about there's the the mental, there's the emotional, and then there's the physical, and we separate them out to think of them like dials. So you can think of it like on a stereo, and and you have 1 to 10. And what happens is a lot of people, we talk the way we do our trainings, a lot of people come in, they have scar tissue, meaning that when they get mentally driven to a level of 10, so they have a stinking thinking, a negative thought, a self-doubt, fear, whatever it is, and that mental dial goes to 10, then the emotional dial and the physical dial tend to follow suit. When you have the emotional dial, so you feel humiliated, you feel, whatever fear, you feel, whatever the emotion happens to be, when that dial goes to 10, then the mental dial, again, your thoughts or your feelings become your thoughts, which then become your actions. If something's happening where it's a really chaotic, high pressure, all these different stressors and stimulus, and so your physical dial, the body's physiology gets driven to a 10, mentally and emotionally, those dials tend to follow suit. And so another way for people to look at this is mitigation, escalation, and annihilation is what is the stimulus that's happening. So when you're in the mitigation side of it, and the threat is there, but it's maybe smaller, lower, but it's there, people can have an overreaction to things. Their perceptions of what's happening, like you just talked about, the fact that their kids there can change an emotional dial. And so even though you're in the mitigation side of this, where you absolutely have options of removal, de-escalation, and deterring, your emotional or mental or physical dial gets higher than it should, and the other two follow suit. And so again, this scar tissue is very, very dangerous. And I would submit too that within this, we also have to take into consideration the predisposition of the person that's coming into training. We get a lot of people that are just really good men, and they're here because they're like, listen, I get that there's threats in this world, and they're just honest. I don't know what the fuck to do. I have the willingness. I know that. I have the courage. I know I would do something, but I don't know what the fuck to do. So they're like, they recognize, well, not knowing, like tough, there's no such thing as tough anymore. It's trained or untrained. You are one or the other. You're either trained or you are untrained. Okay? So, but when they come in, their dial, their predisposition is better suited to the mitigation tactics. How do I remove myself? What do I say to people? How do I, de-escalate? How do I deter? Because they don't want to have to deal with this, especially lethal force. So even though, when shit's happening, they have that scar tissue in their dial, their dial doesn't go to 10 the same way. Like it's easier for them to be at a 4 or 5. But then all of a sudden, escalation happens, right? And escalation, of course, is an increase in the intensity or the severity. And so this is where this becomes very interesting. And this is what we cover a lot of in our first Weaponized 16 program, is when we start teaching people what the pre-incident indicators, what are the pins, what are the signs that tell me this person is escalating up towards physical conflict, right? We call it the crisis phase, where now you're like, oh shit. When you start just teaching them the pins of escalation, the signs of it, the sequencing of violence, you feel the pushback. They start questioning. Oh, but like you show them a very black and like when somebody goes from this and now like their physical, the body cues, the physical body cues, because there's the physical, there's behavioral, and there's interpersonal communication. That's the 3 areas we measure on. When you show them a physical indicator that has jumped, so an escalation from your he's telling you, he's showing you with his body language that mitigation is not working anymore. It didn't work, and it's not working. Like it's now you have a very reduced chance for de-escalation to work. When you show them that and it's very clear, they question it, and they'll keep questioning it, but it's not questioning that comes from a lack of understanding. It's questioning that comes from desperation, like a hope that there's got to be a different way. There's got to be something that can be done. Go ahead.
Do you think too that it's kind of one and the same? I think, but is that not also just because of what their identity is in that, like at that time in their life? Do you know what I mean? Like if you're coming in at 0, untrained, and you go, okay, well, what is this person's identity? It's like, well, they don't see themselves necessarily as a warrior because they know they're not trained to deal with violence. That's why they're there. That's why they
Yeah.
signed up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, so then if people they feel like, okay, I'm at zero, so what's the closest reference point for dealing with violence that they feel they can actually do? Because
Yeah.
as we've talked about in other podcasts, you'll only ever actually do what you think you can do and what you think will work. So for the average person coming in, they think, well, I could try to talk my way out of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's all tied into hope, and it's like maybe I can de-escalate this thing, and so it makes sense that they're going to be doing that. Yeah, but couldn't I do this? Couldn't I say that? That might still work. Like you said, that desperation comes out.
Yeah.
So to me, it makes perfect sense because of where they're coming from and just who they believe they are, because they need to be shifted. Do they need to be trained? And then it'll change everything about them, right?
Yes, 100%. And that's where all of a sudden now, why I thought this was so valuable to talk about, is we see the three-dimensional, we see the necessity for whole person integrated development, and we see how emotionally intelligent modern protectors, warriors need to be. Like because you're right. Why do most people start there? Why is that their predisposition? Because of all the reasons that you listed. That is 1,000% true, and that's why in escalation they begin to lag. Now, the greatest analogy on this is they literally are not buffering fast enough. They can't stream the pins. Everyone's experienced it. You're trying to watch a show, not so much nowadays, but I mean every now and then. But it's not buffering fast enough, so you're lagging. Well, it's fucking annoying to watch a show or listen to something when there's lag. Imagine lagging in recognizing the sequencing of violence, how deadly that can become. And it's because you don't have the emotional intelligence. It wasn't developed. So I think that sums up escalation. So I'm going to keep going from a mitigation to annihilation, and escalation is almost kind of makes sense on its own a little bit for the points of this conversation. But to all of a sudden go from like I'm 1,000% committed to mitigation. Why? Because that's where this is right now. There is no need for anything else. There is no moral or legal justification for anything other than mitigation, and so I am 1,000% invested in mitigation. My ego being checked, having empathy, meaning that I'm seeing it from other people's perspectives, so that, I mean, I know as a human being, it's very easy for me to react and therefore to overreact, to have my bias. So somebody does something to me in a parking lot, they steal my spot, or in a restaurant, they say, look, do whatever the fuck it is. We all have biases. We all have rules and values where we go, that's not how one human being should act towards another human being, but those are our rules. And now some of my rules, just like some of your rules, are generally socially accepted by the majority, which then even further complicates the problem, because we say, well, yes, but the majority of people would side with me. But that doesn't mean you're right. It just that's a bias. Like, we each are experiencing life through our own unique reality. Yes, there are facts. So what I'm getting at is I believe someone who's truly emotional intelligent has the capacity for empathy, meaning they recognize and feel and understand how it's hitting them. This is what I think, what I feel, and what I believe should be done. These are my feelings, these are my thoughts, these are the actions that I believe are correct. The second I use empathy, I'm actually stepping in and seeing it from somebody else's perspective. That's the whole, one of the foundations, one of the fundamental aspects of law is, was it reasonable? To who? To a group of your peers. Would it be reasonable for would another reasonable person have come to the same conclusion that you did? My life was in jeopardy. Was that a reasonable conclusion on your behalf? The law doesn't look at it and say, well, that was his truth, and that is beyond reproach. That's his truth. No, what is reasonable? That's why you have a jury of your peers. And they sit there and go, well, no, listen, this. I also saw it the way that he saw it. I also believed this was right, or this was, you get what I mean? So I think, that part of it is very, very important for us. But it's like, to go from being solely and truly invested in the mitigation, and then to recognize that despite your best efforts, escalation is occurring. And then in that escalation, I'm not saying there's still not opportunity to remove de-escalate deter, but within that, there is a line when all of a sudden it slides over. And it slides over to where you go, imminent crisis. Imminent grievous bodily harm or death is now on the table. Now pause right there for a second. Imagine the emotional intelligence required to be truly, not lip service, truly invested in mitigation of this situation. Despite all your skills, despite the levels of ruthlessness and viciousness and killer instinct and, honed and sharpened and, just dialed in strategies and tactics and your understanding of tool of violence, you are genuinely invested in mitigation, then all of a sudden you go, mitigation has now failed. I must now be preemptive and recognize it's time to flip the switch and go to annihilation. That maybe there's people that'll sit here and listen to me say that and go, yeah, that's easy. That's just fucking easy. Well, either you're delusional, or like you don't fully understand what we're talking about. You haven't really lived it or experienced it, or you have. You're very well trained. You have a tremendous amount of experience through training as well as real world application, and you have developed this level of emotional intelligence. And that is a very rare individual. That is a very elite individual. But, having done this for 30 years, I would say this. I had to be trained in this. This was not natural to me. My experiences growing up did not lend itself to me developing a kind of, let's say, air quotes, natural predisposition to this. I had to be trained in this for sure because my dial was stuck. And I went through different periods as I was a younger man, being very shy and being very much on the mitigation side of it. And then a period as I got a little bit older where I had this temper for a lot of different reasons, where all of a sudden it was like everything, I was a hammer and everything was a nail. I had no skill set, but I mean, everything was like just fucking short fuse, boom, everything, I would just go to annihilation. So I get this. I would still say that as of today, why it's so important for me to perpetually train this is because emotional intelligence has no capacity on development. Every time you train, I hope that I gain not just physical skills, but mental and I want emotional intelligence. I need to grow in that area because I need the ability to self-regulate. So that flipping of the switch, and again, I'm just thinking of 3 or 4 people that I'm currently working with right now and taking through this process, where at different stages, each of them, I see the conflict in them. I see where they're better suited to mitigation. And then as we start to get into okay, shit's escalating, I feel the pushback because, like you said, they don't have the other side of it. And then as we continue to develop the training and now the escalation, it's become clear that we need to move to annihilation. I see the acceptance building in them to where they go, okay, I have tried mitigation. I want mitigation. I cannot remove de-escalated deter. I'm seeing what I'm seeing and I trust what I'm seeing. That imminent grievous bodily harm or death is now in front of me. And they are now, as you give them the strategies, tactics, and tools, but it's more than that. It's teaching them the right mental fuel. Like, what is killer instinct? What is ruthlessness and viciousness? You know what I mean? And as you start to develop this, to me, what really is the fuel that turns somebody, you can teach somebody anything you want. You can watch them doing it. But doing it, executing it, repeating it, isn't fighting with it, isn't defending with it. There's it's, functional. But you start seeing that what makes it functional is their commitment to it, their intent behind it. And that's when you start going, now you're starting to embody the nature of annihilation. And as harsh as that might be for a lot of people, the tool of violence works for both good guys and bad guys the exact same way. The difference between self-defense and murder is determined later in a court of law. somebody, a bad guy that is attempting to murder your family, that is ruthless and has no fucking rules and is willing to do whatever it fucking takes to execute on his and fulfill his evil intention. The good guy has to equal. If you can't do what they can do, you're dead. And now, of course, we're talking the extreme crisis, life and death, but that is the reality of it. So when you go from mitigation to annihilation, they are so polar opposite. And again, to have the ability to truly annihilate, I believe can make mitigation, like again, the emotional intelligence is really, really, it's so important, and it's massive. It's impressive to develop that type of development.
I think too, it's important, like for people watching this or listening to this, to really hear the words you said and like every word you said, because I think some people could hear this, and if they're not really dialed in and paying attention to what you're saying, they could be confused and thinking, oh, you're trying to take like someone who's genuinely a nice guy, a caring person, a loving guy, and you're trying to turn him into this like monster. And it's like that, it couldn't be further from the truth. Yeah. Because it's not about changing who people are. You said it's about the tool of violence works for both good and bad people. People just hear about violence. No, the tool. Like violence is a tool. This isn't about changing who the person is. It's about teaching the person to recognize violence is just a tool, and anybody can wield that tool, whether it's for good or bad, like you said. Yeah. And I just think that part of it's so big, because I think it would let some people who may have initial pushback to be like, oh, okay, no, it is okay for a nice, loving, caring person to wield the tool of violence if it's for good. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I just wanted to kind of put a highlight on that, because I think it's too easy for people to gloss over and be like, oh, you're just talking about turning people into killers. And it's like, no, not like that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm actually going to touch on that a little bit deeper, but we had a comment from Anthony, and I just want to read it out because I think it's very well stated. And he just said that I think a huge issue these days is that so many people have never experienced a consequential situation, which I love the way you worded that. They're committed to their faith in the security of the system and believe that the violent criminal world won't affect them. And you are, bang on, 100%. And that is like why I really love the first part of it, is that they've never experienced a consequential situation. That is why I'm so dedicated to like putting out information on this, like why we do the podcast, why I do all this content. It's just because I have experienced a consequential, a situation. I was the victim of an attempted murder. It changes things for you. And our whole goal is to get people, I want people to understand that without having to go and experience that. Right, so it's like making someone a pre-combat veteran. Like you don't want to have to go to war and learn everything the fucking hard way. And if you're lucky to survive, that can have a lot of baggage with that. But if we have the right training, we create a pre-combat veteran where they're much more inoculated against that. It's not going to be bulletproof, but you're just as best prepared as you possibly can be. And so that is 100% what we're trying to get at here. And here's where I'll double back to the scenario, what you said, Dustin, because now I often try to give people this situation. I say, listen, like pick somebody that you genuinely love. Like pick a man that you know in your life that is a brother, a cousin, just somebody, but you're like, this is my people. And now, and now, hopefully, you pick someone too that is, let's quote unquote, your average man, right? Meaning that they're fucking. Remember, I believe a true man needs to be a provider and a protector. But you have a lot of good men out there that are great providers. They're family men. They sacrifice a lot. Get up every day. They work their fucking asses off. They're committed to their family, their wives and stuff. Good people. Now you have this guy. And now put him, that guy, who is this nice guy, and you can put him in a situation where that nice guy, that empathy, I just want to live my fucking life, right? And he's in a situation where he can walk away from that. He can de-escalate. He can deter. And you're like, yes, that's what I love about this guy. Like, yeah, like, he has to, it might hurt him a little bit to walk and be like, fuck, like, oh, but he just gets that it wasn't legally or morally justified. So he walks away. And you're like, that's a good man. Now take that same good man and put him in that situation where the consequence of that situation is some violent guy where you go, he can't walk away. And so this violent criminal that's in front of him, like, do you understand now? Just carry this through. Do you know what it looks like when violent criminals, because it's typically not one, brutalize a fucking innocent, a person who does not have it within them. Now, they might try to fight back, but it's like these violent criminals, man, you know, when you fall on the ground, they don't go, yeah, fucking knocked him down. That just, in their brain, it's like stomp his fucking head into oblivion. Like, you know, stab that motherfucker, like, you know, hold him while I fucking stab him, like, you know, fucking, you know, kick him in the fucking test. Like, I was bottled, like, going, like, you know, just, they're fucking, you know, you beaten unrecognizable. They're taking a bottle and trying to fucking collapse your entire fucking skull. Like, you know, and this is the part where it's like, yeah, you need to understand this, what it looks like when one human being attempts to murder another human being. Because it's not fucking pretty. It's like you can sit at home all day long and watch National Geographic on TV and see the lion hunt the gazelle or the shark hit the seal. But when you actually get your fucking ass out there, most people are like shocked at how fucking gory it is. Yeah, no shit. One species, you know, like destroying another species to eat. Like it's natural, but it's fucking violent, man. So a human being trying to murder another human being. Now, my point is, if you have that person that you loved and you cared about, give him the skill sets. I mean, imagine being stuck on the sidelines, like you can't get to them to help them. And then all of a sudden seeing that person you loved reach up and fucking rip an eyeball out of that motherfucker that's trying to murder him or his family. Imagine seeing him get the hold of that fucking bottle, break that bottle, and watching him understand how to fucking slice that and cutting arteries and tendons. And really, I mean, like watching him operate with a proficiency and then watching that first fucking violent criminal go down. And then seeing him, that, you know, that ruthlessness, you know what the look in his eyes would be? Do you know the emotional state that he'd have to be in? And it's not chaos. It's controlled, you know, ruthlessness, controlled viciousness. It's a trained mind directing an educated and trained body. Strategic and fucking tactical. You would be losing your shit. You'd be cheering. You'd be like, who, like, you would want to see that good man save not only his life, but the life of his family, his kids, or other innocent people. Like, I think of any underdog movie you've ever watched, and when you hear that fucking Rocky theme music where that underdog starts to battle back, I mean, it's the highest high. We wouldn't want that for our loved ones. You don't think as with having two young daughters, I don't want my daughter to have that ability when some fucking piece of shit or multiple guys are trying to assault her? That maybe they're relaying some damage because they have the initiation, they have that advantage. Maybe they get her in an ambush a little bit. But you don't think that I want to see some switch flip in her where it's like, you know, listen, she's raised with compassion and empathy and love and kindness and caring, and it's been amplified because she's also been exposed to the realities of this world. Not over-exaggerated, just the realities of this world and the evil that exists in this world. And she understands, she has developed both because yin and yang. You cannot be a very empathetic, compassionate, and caring person if you don't understand how to be ruthless. Those two things feed each other. I don't mean it like they feed one. I mean that they amplify each other and they give you a different depth of emotional intelligence. And that's what we're talking about. So, you know, from conflict mitigation, escalation to annihilation, fuck. Now we got to step back and go, how does your training address this? Because this cannot be, this can't be like police firearms training. This can't be a, you know, qualify once a year on the range, shoot 50 rounds to get an certain grouping, and then you don't ever have to train again. Like, it's encouraged. You get what I mean? Like, we got to have very high standards. Every time you train this these dials, you have to be breaking the scar tissue. Because when someone's rude, inappropriate, aggressive, or violent, but there is no intent to harm directly, your emotional dial, you're going to feel that. Somebody is humiliating you, someone is, whatever the fuck they're doing. And if your emotional dial goes to 10 and your mental dial goes to 10 and your physical dial goes to 10, you're going to overreact. You're going to overreact, underreact, or freeze. The point is you're reacting. Amateurs react, professionals respond or take action. You're not going to win. Like, whether, you know, you're going to lose physically, you're going to lose legally, you're going to lose more, you're going to lose on some front or multiple fronts. So we have to break the scar tissue. That means that this has to be an active component of our training, an active aspect of our training all the time. It's not a unit that you cycle through once a year in your training, or that you talk about and reference through a lecture and then leave it. That's not like whole person integrated development. So again, it just shows warriors need to be three-dimensional. Their training needs to be three-dimensional. There has to be training for the pre-conflict, the conflict, and the post-conflict. It has to be, not from 0 to 50, which a lot of training is. It's got to be 0 right back around again. You know what I mean? So, and I think that was a really good point to make too. That, a lot of people just see it as going, you're just training people. No, we're training people to mitigate, understand escalation, and then understand and have the capacity for annihilation. It's full circle. And then let's just, maybe we'll get to the end of this conversation, wrap it this way, but mitigation to escalation to annihilation, back to mitigation. Shit can de-escalate. Sometimes you're in mitigation, you're trying to remove the escalator, deter. Shit starts to escalate, you still are trying to de-escalate, remove the escalator, deter. And then all of a sudden, it's like, boom, something physical, something tactical has to happen. And that threat energy that was in front of you, where it was reasonable for you to believe that imminent grievous bodily harm or death was on the table, and all of a sudden something happens and you fire that switch and you go to 10, and that killer instinct, ruthlessness, and viciousness comes out with no fucking psychic hindrance, because I'm legally and morally justified. And at the end of the day, I'm going home, motherfucker. And that switch flips, and that threat energy, it disappears. Maybe they're not necessarily all the way out, but the point is, they've lost, you've knocked the fucking piss and vinegar out of them. You've caught them on the blind side, right? Speed, surprise, violence of action, and all of a sudden, there's a gap. The balloon shrinks, and now you go back to mitigation. And then when you go back to mitigation, you're not fighting that. You're not still switched on at 10. Motherfucking, you're controlling yourself, but you can't, you're not, it's like, I've seen guys like that. It's like, they're on a thoroughbred, and the thoroughbred wants to fucking run, and the jockey's like fucking pulling on the reins, but it's a fucking battle. You want to literally be able to shut the fucking switch off and right back to being like empathy, compassion, you know what I mean? Yet still.
It's like you talked about before when you said you see people who don't recognize the pins as they're escalating, and they miss the jump to escalation to annihilation, and there's that lag time, right? Well, it's the same going the other way. Like you just alluded to, it's like there can't be a lag coming down, because if there's a lag going up, that's when you're potentially going to get yourself killed. If there's a lag going down, that's when you're legally and morally going to fuck up. That's when you're going to be like, oh, I just did something I was not legally or morally justified to do because I had a lag shutting it off. Yeah. So the lag is just as important going both ways.
Yeah, 100%.
And again, that kind of touches back on what I was saying about, at the end of the day, this is just a tool of violence. If it's just a tool, well, then once you're trained in using that tool, you can turn it on, you can turn it off.
100%.
It becomes that simple.
Yeah.
But not if you come at it from you got to just change who people are and just make them crazy maniacs. Like, well, no, then you can't turn that off. So why would you do that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Which is all about developing our inner control box, right? Like the 4 dimensions, the core 4, right? You have to have an awareness is one whole section of study. You have to have, the mindset. You have to have the strategies, which is all your physical, and then you have to have control, the inner control box. If you can't regulate your response, you're going to lose every time, like you said, on one of those levels, right? So, I think it was important. And for me, the big takeaway today, just because I really like to try to highlight my bullet points on this, it wasn't about breaking down each thing and saying, what are our actual mitigation techniques? Like, how are we de-escalating, deterring, and removing all that type of stuff? It wasn't about what are the pins of escalation? How do I recognize? We've done tons of podcasts and all those individual things. It really was about recognizing that the range, the dials, and what the contrast is of those things. Because, your last point just nailed it. It can happen quick. You can go from mitigation to annihilation back. Like it jumps, man. Now, violence always is linear. It's either going up or it's going down. It's not random. It doesn't jump all over the place. But man, in the blink of an eye, it can go from mitigation, low level to fucking life and death, like super fucking fast. And then shit can happen and it can come right back out of that. And you don't want, again, what you talked about was defending to punishing. Big difference. And, I have, again, we study a lot of the court cases. We study criminality. Over 30 years, I cannot tell you how many, dockets I have on file of court cases where somebody used extreme levels of violence, physical violence, and it was all defend. And then at a certain point, there was one final act done, one final punch, one final kick, one final bottle, one final what a knife, one final act, and that was deemed punishment. And that is where the legal trouble started. And there's lots of cases where the physiology of where you're at can justify why that happened. The blood rush, the fear. A lot of men are not able to admit that they were afraid, which then the physiology doesn't line up. They don't understand what condition black is, inattentional blindness, all of these different physiological things that we study and that we train with people. But my point is, defending versus punishing can sometimes be one line, and you go, well, what, the guy did that all this other shit he did, and that's what you guys are like, that's what they're have a legal problem with? Yep. Because the threat was no longer there. And you have a legal and a moral obligation to recognize this. Again, there are times when there's valid justification for why that was not recognized, and people are fine, but I've seen a lot where they're not fine. There is a consequence to that. And that's, again, trained or untrained. There's no such thing as tough. Violence is a discipline of study. And the violent criminals, they live a violent criminal lifestyle. They've been in and out of the system. Their predisposition as they grow up, they're in this world. They share, they talk, they have blueprints for how they successfully rape, assault, and murder people. They share that. They become educated. The longer they're in the criminal world and the criminal system, the smarter these motherfuckers become. Good men are spending their time going to school, getting married, having kids, working hard, acquiring things for a better life for themselves and their kids, which is all massively important. And it's a great, we're lucky to be living in a part of the world we have the right and the ability to do that. But at the same time, you got to be able to protect what you're developing, right? These guys, I'm tired of the criminal advantage. And of course, we all know the justice system and the mental health care system, it's in bad fucking shape right now. But, I can't fix that. That's not my fight. Thank God there's people out there that are working on that. They're fighting, they're trying their best, but that's just not my fight. Mine is to help weaponize and educate good men, to give them the strategies, tactics, and tools they need to deal with where we are at right now. Because every single day, man, more and more violent criminals are being turned back out on their streets. We're having more and more repeated offenders of violent criminal acts. And they're just, the system is really, really fucked, and it's terrifying. So more than ever now, we need good men to weaponize, right? That's our mission. That's our goal. That's my role in this, in my part of this fight, is to help educate people and protect them physically, mentally, emotionally, legally. It's all part of it, right? So I don't know. For me, that's probably good. Dustin, any final thoughts that you wanna throw down range on this?
No, I don't think so. It was good. I'm happy to be back. I definitely missed being here the last few weeks. So we're just wrapping up, and I'm already looking forward to next week.
Yeah, I am as well and stuff. So it was a good 2 weeks, and I'm happy to be back. Love sharing. So we'll end it this way. First off, thanks for Anthony. Thanks a lot for jumping in, commenting. Appreciate everyone that's watching this, listening to this. Again, we're not trying to sell shit. My whole goal is I believe more and more men need to train. Find realistic training. Find training that gives you the skills physically, mentally, and emotionally to be your protector as well as your families and other innocent people. We're just trying to share knowledge and give people different insights. The world is obsessed with sport and martial art right now and fighting, and violence is a completely different animal. It's a language in and of itself, and that is our goal, is to help people understand the language of violence. So my only ask is that you share it forward to someone you think can benefit of this. Wherever you listen to your podcast, it takes some time. It takes less than 90 seconds. Give us a rating, leave a comment. The rating is massive. If you feel we deserve it, a 5-star rating. You have no idea how many more people that allows our podcast to get out to that think like we think and share our goal and our vision. Our whole process is to grow this organically. And so that is my only ask. Other than that, Dustin, thank you so much. I always appreciate your time, your energy, your insight, your experience. And that's it, guys. Perfect, Anthony. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it. The support, it means a lot, and engaging, that is awesome. I'm right on the same mindset with you. So that's it, everybody. Until next time, as always, please stay safe, stay weaponized. We're going to chat again soon, everybody. Take care.